I used to count the footsteps in the hallway. Every night, like clockwork, I'd lie still in bed with the blankets pulled up to my chin and listen. 1, 2, 3. Pause. That pause was the part that twisted my stomach. It meant he was outside my door. Sometimes he just stood there. Other times, he turned the knob. Our hallway was small, just 4 steps from his room to mine. But it felt like the longest road in the world when it was dark and silent, and my heart was pounding so loud I thought it would give me away. I was 15 the first time it happened. I still remember what I was wearing. Pajama shorts with tiny stars on them, and a worn-out hoodie that smelled like detergent and cheap perfume. Mom had gone out for a late shift. He had made popcorn. I thought we were going to watch a movie. I don't remember the movie. Only that I felt wrong afterward. Dirty. Not like I'd been physically hurt, but like my soul had been rearranged. Like someone had come in with muddy shoes and trampled over a part of me I didn't even know existed. When Mom came home that night, I wanted to tell her. I really did, but he was right behind her, kissing her cheek, pretending to yawn and saying he was going to bed. I just smiled. I remember thinking, maybe I imagined it. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it felt. But the footsteps kept coming, night after night. He was smart, never left bruises, never said anything that could be recorded, just whispers, just touches that could be played off as accidental if anyone asked. Gaslighting was his favorite weapon. He'd joke about how I was too sensitive, too emotional. He'd say, "You need to grow up, kiddo. Not everything is about you." At school, I tried to pretend I was normal. I joined a yearbook club, smiled in photos, passed my classes. But every time a teacher put a hand on my shoulder or leaned too close, I flinched. I started to feel like I was broken. Like maybe this was just what life was for girls like me. I told the school counselor once, or I tried. I said, "I think my stepdad makes me uncomfortable." She looked at me over her glasses and asked, "What do you mean by uncomfortable?" I froze. I didn't have the words, not the right ones. "How do you explain something that hides behind locked doors and forced smiles?" She nodded politely, gave me a stress ball, and told me to journal my feelings. That night, he came into my room again. I stayed still, trying to breathe through my nose so I wouldn't make noise. When he left, I cried into my pillow until I passed out. I started keeping notes. Not in a diary, he'd find that. I used an old school planner and wrote everything in code. Tuesday, 3 steps. Door clicked. Smell of cigarettes. Friday, no entry. Relief. It wasn't proof, but it helped me feel like I wasn't losing my mind. Then came the night he whispered, "No one will believe you anyway." That sentence didn't just break me. It lit something inside me. A spark I didn't know I had, because he was right. No one would believe me, not yet, but I could make them. So I began watching him the way he watched me. I studied his patterns, his behaviors. I kept every scrap of trash he threw away in my room, tissues, receipts, anything. I started using an old tablet as a hidden camera. It was old and glitchy, but it worked. I'd prop it behind a stack of books on my desk and let it run while I pretended to sleep. The footage was sickening, but not enough. He never did anything full-on illegal on camera. Just hovering, breathing near me, staring at me while I slept. And still, I kept going, because something in me had shifted. One night, I recorded a voice memo on my phone. It was the first time I said the words out loud. "My name is Emily Carson. I'm 16 years old, and my stepfather, Brian, touches me when my mom isn't home." I didn't cry. I didn't stutter. I just stared at the ceiling and recorded it like a confession. Then I saved it, labeled it as a song file, hid it in a folder labeled Math Notes. For weeks I collected notes, audio, camera clips, timestamps. I built my case the way a lawyer might. I imagined myself on a stand telling the world what he did and how no one listened, and still no one saw me. Mom was the hardest. She loved him, or at least she needed to believe she did. I saw the way she clung to his hand at parties, how her voice softened when he entered a room. I tried to hate her for not seeing, but mostly I hated myself for not screaming loud enough. Until the night of the awards ceremony. It was a school thing. I got second place in a state writing contest, and they were giving me a certificate. Mom couldn't come. Late shift again. Brian came instead. He smiled for the pictures, waved at my teachers, told them how proud he was. I could see the lies dripping off his skin like sweat. When we got home, he tried again. This time, I didn't freeze. I screamed, loud, piercing. I shoved a lamp off the table and hurled it at the wall. Neighbors came running. Someone called the police. For the first time, he looked afraid. They didn't arrest him that night, but they questioned me, and I showed them everything. The footage, the notes, the voice memo, my timeline, the look on the officer's face. I'll never forget it, like he had just opened a door to a house he didn't want to enter. Mom cried, begged, denied, then broke down. I think that night, something in her shattered too. They took him away 2 days later. It wasn't over, of course. There were hearings, interviews, tests. The trial would come later, but for the first time in years, my room felt like mine again. I locked the door that night, and this time no one turned the knob. People think once you speak up, it gets easier. That justice will swoop in like a superhero and save you, wrap you in safety, and the bad guy disappears into the night. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life just gets messier. After I showed the police everything, there was a strange kind of quiet in our house. Brian wasn't there anymore, but his presence still clung to the walls. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow at the edge of my vision. It all felt like him. Mom stopped speaking to me for 3 days. She wasn't angry, exactly. She looked hollow, like someone had scooped out her insides and left only a shell behind. She would sit at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at nothing. I wanted to reach for her to say something, anything, but the words felt stuck in my throat, and some part of me hated her for not knowing, for not protecting me. On the 4th day, she finally looked at me and said, "Are you sure?" I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just nodded. She never asked again. School was worse. I had told the truth, yes, but it didn't come with a cape. It came with stares, whispers, awkward silences in hallways, friends who didn't know what to say, so they just stopped talking altogether. I became the girl with the story. I hated that word, story. Like this was fiction. Like I had written myself into a rumor. But then one of my teachers, Ms. Holloway, pulled me aside. She didn't say much, just handed me a note. It said, "You are not alone. What you did was brave, and I believe you." That was the first time I cried in days, not from pain, but from the strange warmth of being seen. The investigation moved slowly, slower than I expected. Apparently, even with evidence, there are procedures and technicalities and burden of proof. Brian's lawyer tried everything, said I was unstable, that I had a vendetta, that teenagers lie, but I had my planner, my voice memo, my videos, and I had my voice. I testified in a preliminary hearing. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. The courtroom was cold and too bright. Brian sat across the room, wearing a cheap suit and a smug expression. He didn't look at me. Not once, but I looked at him. I stared straight into the eyes of the man who stole years from me, and I spoke. I did not make this up. I wish I had. I wish it were a lie, but I can't take back what he did to me. I can only tell you the truth. Afterward, the prosecutor told me I was a compelling witness. I didn't care. I just wanted it to be over. Mom started talking to me more after that, slowly, awkwardly. She apologized one night while doing the dishes. Didn't look at me, just kept scrubbing a plate and said, "I should have seen it, I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't forgive her, but because I didn't know if I could. The waiting was the worst part. Weeks turned into months. Brian was out on bail, living somewhere else. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart jumped. I kept a bat under my bed and a pocket knife in my backpack, just in case. Therapy helped. A little. My therapist's name was Carla. She had warm eyes and never interrupted me when I spoke. I told her things I hadn't told anyone, not even the police, like how I used to dream that I could scream so loud the walls would crack, that I once tried to sleep in the closet just to feel like I had control over the door. "You did what you had to do to survive," she said, "and now you're doing what you need to do to heal." Healing. That word felt so distant, like a place I could see on a map but didn't know how to reach. Then, one morning, we got the date. The trial would start in 2 months. That's when everything shifted again. Media got involved, not national, not yet, but local news stations picked it up. "Teen girl accuses stepfather of sexual misconduct," they said. "Trial scheduled for October." My name wasn't printed, but people connected the dots. They always do. My mom's job got weird. People stopped inviting her to things. Someone left a nasty note on her windshield at work. Maybe be a better mother next time. She didn't tell me. I found it in the trash. We stopped going out much. Grocery runs turned into late-night dashes. Church became streaming online. Our world shrank. But something in me grew. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. I started writing again. Not in code this time, just real. Honest. I wrote poems about closed doors and girls with lion hearts, about silence that could shatter glass. Ms. Holloway read one and asked if she could share it with the school paper. I said yes. The headline read, "Her words roared louder than his silence." The day the trial began, I wore a dark blue blazer and flats that didn't match. My hands trembled, but my spine held straight. I took the stand and told my story, again, this time to a jury, to strangers. And I watched their eyes as they listened. Some winced, some looked away, but none of them doubted. Brian's lawyer tried to twist everything, suggested I wanted attention, that I had a history of drama, but the evidence didn't lie. Neither did my voice. I saw his face when the prosecutor played the audio file, the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes narrowed. For the first time, he looked small, like a man caught under his own weight. The trial lasted 4 days. On the 5th, the jury returned with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. I don't remember breathing, just the sound of the gavel, and my mother's hand grabbing mine so tight it hurt. They led him away in cuffs. It wasn't victory. Not the way movies show it. There was no applause, no fireworks, just a heavy, tired kind of relief. Like I'd been carrying a boulder for years, and someone finally helped me set it down. The next morning, I woke up and opened my window. The air smelled like October, crisp and a little brave. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I didn't expect to become anyone's headline, but 3 days after the verdict, there it was. My name, my face, my story, circulating across social media, local papers, even a few national outlets. Someone had leaked courtroom photos, another had shared my poem from the school paper, and then, without warning, I became her, the girl who stood up, the stepdaughter who took down her abuser, the voice of a generation. It was surreal. My phone exploded with messages. Some from classmates I hadn't spoken to in months, offering awkward apologies or support. But others, from strangers, hundreds of them. Women from all over the country telling me their stories. Some wrote paragraphs, others just sent emojis. One message simply said, "Because of you, I told my mom what my uncle did." I didn't know how to respond. At first, I didn't respond at all. Because while the world was turning me into a symbol, I still felt like a broken version of myself. Yes, Brian was gone. Yes, I had testified, but the echoes of his voice were still in my head. The way he'd whisper through the door. The scent of his cologne lingering on the couch. Trauma doesn't vanish with a verdict. And yet, something was different. People listened now. I started walking taller. Speaking louder, I raised my hand more in class. I joined a feminist student group. Not because I suddenly believed I was healed, but because I was tired of feeling small. Ms. Holloway became more than a teacher. She became a mentor. She invited me to a local panel on youth advocacy. I almost said no. The idea of sitting in front of an audience, telling my story again, felt suffocating. But she said, "There's someone out there who needs to hear you, just like you once needed to hear someone else." So I went. There were maybe 20 people in the room, mostly students, a few teachers. One older woman in the back cried the entire time I spoke. I didn't tell every detail, just enough. Enough to say, "This is real, and you are not crazy, and you are not alone." When it ended, I stood up to leave, but the crowd clapped. Not politely, genuinely, as if I had given them something they didn't know they needed. Outside, a journalist from an online magazine waited, young, excited, recorder already running. She said, "Do you mind if I ask a few questions for a piece I'm doing?" "You're kind of everywhere right now." I hesitated, then nodded. We sat on the steps outside the community center. She asked me about the trial, about how I felt now, about what I wanted to say to other survivors. I answered honestly. I didn't try to sound wise. I told her I still had nightmares, that I hated the color of my bedroom walls because they reminded me of him, that some days I felt powerful and others like a pile of glass held together by willpower. She smiled and said, "Thank you for not pretending." The article was published a week later. The headline read, "Emily Carson is not your victim. She's your wake-up call." That's when things truly shifted. I got an email from a nonprofit called Voices United. They worked with survivors of abuse, particularly teens. They wanted me to speak at a rally in Washington, D.C. I thought it was spam at first, but it wasn't. They were serious. Travel paid, hotel arranged, a 15-minute spot on stage alongside senators, authors, and activists. I showed the email to my mom. Her eyes welled up and she whispered, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't perfect between us. We were still learning how to navigate this new terrain, where she was no longer my protector, and I was no longer her child in need of rescue. But we were trying. I flew to DC a month later. The rally was massive. Thousands of people, banners, speeches, chanting crowds. I stood backstage, heart pounding, clutching my note cards like they were armor. The girl before me on stage was a mother who had lost her daughter to domestic violence. Her voice cracked with grief, but she never stopped speaking. Then it was my turn. I stepped up to the microphone, took a breath, and looked out at a sea of faces. "I'm not here today because I'm brave," I began. "I'm here because I was afraid, every day, for years. But fear taught me how to fight, and it taught me that silence is not safety, it's surrender." I told them about Brian, about the hallway, about the coded planner. I told them about the night I screamed and finally made the world listen. I kept my voice steady, not because I wasn't scared, but because I was done being silenced. When I finished, there was a moment of quiet. Then, applause. Loud, sustained, deafening. That night, back in the hotel room, I sat by the window and let the noise settle. I looked at the Capitol dome glowing in the distance and felt different. Not fixed, not whole, but real, present, alive. I started getting invitations, podcasts, interviews, school presentations. Some called me an activist. I wasn't sure I liked the word. I wasn't campaigning, I wasn't holding signs, I was just telling the truth. But maybe that's what activism is too. Truth spoken again and again until it drowns out the lies. The hate came too, of course, online trolls. She's lying. She just wants attention. Another fake victim. I cried over the first few, blocked the next dozen, then stopped reading entirely. Because for every cruel message, there were 10 more from girls like me. One wrote, "You saved me, even though we've never met." And maybe that was enough. Not to erase the past, not to cure the scars, but to make them mean something. The crowd faded, the applause dimmed, the interviews slowed, and for the first time in nearly a year, my world went quiet. Not in a bad way, just still. After Washington, after the articles and panels and cameras, I came home to a bedroom that felt smaller than I remembered. The posters on my wall looked childish. The bed too soft. I sat on the edge for a long time and stared at the closed door, half expecting to hear footsteps. But there was only silence. I slept that night without locking it. Healing, I learned, isn't a straight line. There's no finish line to cross, no certificate of completion. Some days I felt strong. Other days I cried because a commercial showed a father hugging his daughter, and it hit me in a place I didn't know was still raw. I kept going to therapy. Carla told me something once that stuck with me. Recovery isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering safely. So I let myself remember. I didn't run from it. I wrote everything down, every feeling, every flashback, every nightmare. I filled notebooks. Some pages were tear-stained, others just angry scribbles, but they were mine. Senior year started in the fall. I returned to school to whispers again, only this time, they weren't whispers of pity or gossip. They were words like respect, courage, hero. And while I didn't feel like any of those things, I smiled anyway, because I wasn't hiding anymore. College applications asked me to write about a challenge I had overcome. I stared at the prompt for hours, wondering how you shrink something so big into 500 words. In the end, I didn't write about Brian, not directly. I wrote about voice, about how sometimes the hardest thing isn't what happens to you. It's choosing to speak when silence is safer. I got accepted to a university 2 states away. Full scholarship, creative writing major. When the acceptance letter came, I read it 3 times before I believed it was real. Then I ran to the kitchen and showed my mom. She cried. This time they were happy tears. We were better, she and I. Not perfect, but better. We had learned how to talk again, how to sit in silence without it being heavy. She started therapy, too. We were healing on parallel tracks, meeting in the middle when we could. One afternoon, we sat in the backyard drinking lemonade, and she said, "You're going to help a lot of people one day." I didn't answer. I just looked up at the sky and whispered, "I hope so." That summer, I was invited to speak at a high school in another town, just a group of girls. No cameras, no microphones. Just folding chairs and a nervous counselor who wasn't sure how to introduce me. "I think you all know who she is," the woman said awkwardly. The girls stared at me like I was made of glass. I took a deep breath. "Before anything else," I said, "I want you to know I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to tell you the truth. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel broken. But it's not okay to believe that you deserve it. And one by one, they nodded. Not all at once, but enough. Afterwards, a girl stayed behind. She waited until everyone else left, then came up and whispered, "My stepbrother, She couldn't finish. I placed my hand gently on hers and said, "I believe you." She cried. I didn't try to fix it. I just stayed beside her until she stopped shaking. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about me anymore. What happened to me would always be part of my story. But it wasn't the whole story. I was writing a new chapter now. One with dorm rooms and late night writing sessions, with spoken word poetry slams and empty pizza boxes, with girls like me who wanted to turn pain into power. The media still called sometimes, but I didn't always say yes. I didn't owe them everything. I had already given enough. Sometimes I'd get letters from girls I'd never met. Some were survivors, others just wanted to say thank you. I kept every single one in a shoebox under my bed. On hard days, I'd open it and remind myself that even if I couldn't fix the world, I had changed something. One letter said, "You reminded me that my voice matters. That I matter, and that was enough." One evening, as summer faded into fall, I walked past the courthouse where I had testified. The building looked smaller now, less intimidating. I stood there for a minute, watching people go in and out, and realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I walked home slowly, not because I was tired, but because I could. Because I had nothing to run from, no doors to check, no footsteps to count. Just a life that was mine again, and I kept walking.